Yes.
Good.
I'm Rosemarie Polemi. I'm a volunteer here at the VA, and I'll be conducting your interview today, March 16th, 2023. The purpose of this interview is to provide you with an opportunity to reflect on your service for the country. You can think of it as a digital memoir of yourself, your family, and friends, and future generations. In addition, we have a brief non-medical questionnaire after this interview that will provide special insight into your life for your consent for your providers to see. Okay. So any questions before we begin?
No, let's go.
All right, sounds great. So will you tell me a little bit about yourself, your childhood and your early years? Where were you born and where did you grow up?
Born in Pasadena, California. Grew up in Southern California.
Nice.
That's about as exciting as it gets. Grade school.
All right. What motivated you to join the military?
I was in college in Montana, University of Montana. Pardon me. And then I went back to California to earn some more money to go back to school. And I got a draft notice. I figured, well, okay. So I joined the Navy instead of being drafted in the Army. My father was a supply officer in World War II in the Navy.
Oh, wow.
So I figured, I'll give the Navy a try.
Okay. And that's why you chose the Navy then, was because...
Instead of being drafted in the Army, I chose the Navy.
Okay.
I thought sea service would be a little more interesting than being in the Army. Nothing against the Army.
Which war did you serve in, and in what capacity did you serve?
Well, I was in from 1965 to a little late in 85, a little over 20 years active duty, 14 years of sea duty, 6 years ashore on recruiting and instructor duty. What was the second part of your question?
In what capacity? What?
Oh, well, I was in engineering. So I was down below decks where most people don't go because I was primarily on steam propelled vessels and high pressure steam propulsion systems. Very hot, very noisy, and you only go down there if you have to. So, but anyway, it was interesting down there because we involved with boilers and main propulsion turbine driven ships. For a while, I worked on conventional and with nuclear submarines also. So that was interesting in San Diego on a submarine tender, USS Nereus. But that was primarily what I did, was engineering.
Okay. What's your most vivid or fond memory?
Probably when I was on the mobile training team. I'll explain that in a bit, what that was. But I was in Pearl Harbor for 6 years, counted as sea duty. On mobile training team, we flew to Pango Pango in American Samoa to do training on a ship as it was returning from its Western Pacific cruise to go back to Pearl Harbor. So that was interesting to fly to see American Samoa and in the southern part of the south of the equator. So,
wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Do you recall any particular humorous or unusual event?
Yeah, one which it wasn't humorous, but it was an interesting event. Because I'm also an amateur radio operator, and in the submarine base in Pearl Harbor, there was an amateur radio recreation station. I was a custodian of that station for a while, from 78 to 82, when I left to go to Great Lakes. And anyway, 1981, December 81 was the 40th anniversary of the Pearl Harbor attack by the Japanese. And Pearl Harbor Survivor Association had their meeting in Honolulu. A number of them, a few of them were amateur radio operators. So like a long story short, we put the station on the air for about 3 days over December 7th, 81. Made a lot of contacts, about 3,800 contacts. Just everybody wanted to make contact with Pearl Harbor. So we flooded the US. We had stations all over the US calling. So the fellows who were hams and Pearl Harbor survivors got a really big kick out. That was quite an experience.
You reached out very far.
Mm-hmm.
Were you awarded any medals or citations during your service?
I kept my nose clean, got a good conduct medal. And also Navy Commendation and Navy Achievement Medal.
What occupations did you have after the service?
When I left the service, I went from Great Lakes, from the instructor training. I retired at Great Lakes, went back to California because my wife's parents and what was left of my family were there. And I interviewed with a fellow at Kemper Insurance as a boiler machinery underwriter. They had a position available as an introduction to that. They wanted somebody preferably who had a college degree, and I did. Because in the Navy, I was able to finish college with Southern Illinois University at Great Lakes. So with SIU and a bachelor's degree and my experience in marine engineering, I interviewed for the job as a boiler machinery underwriter. It's a portion of commercial property line. It's easy to think that if it blew up or if it burned up, I didn't care. But if it blew up, I had a problem. So now we insure things like large refrigeration plants, air conditioning refrigeration. Some of the big accounts I had was Caesar's World in Las Vegas, well, casinos, that and back east. And then the Poconos. Another account when I transferred up here, the job transfer from California to Denver back in '96. Another account I had was the Mormon Church. So I'd fly over to Salt Lake and meet with the risk manager and insurance person with the Mormon Church. And we insured everything the Mormon Church had worldwide. So that was a big account.
Yeah.
So that was very interesting.
Did you have to travel with that to cover those accounts?
No, not really. Just fly to Salt Lake. That's all. Meet with, and then we review what our proposal was for insurance and retain the account because there's other companies do the same thing that we did.
Right.
So no, it went very well. So very nice people. We had a great time.
And what are you doing now?
Now I'm pretty much retired. I volunteer here at the VA, just currently 1 day a week. I look after my wife. She looks after me because we're getting a little long in the tooth here. I'll be 78 in June, and she's almost 76. So our bodies are catching up with our age. We have each have our issues, nothing serious, but we don't have any children. So we look in the mirror. That's who takes care of us.
How did you meet her?
It was a blind date. There was my wife's a registered nurse, and there was a lady who was an X-ray technician in the office that she worked at. There were 4 orthopedic surgeons in Hollywood. She worked for them, and in fact, one of the doctors was an uncle to Mel Blanc. Mel Blanc is the voice of Bugs Bunny and all these cartoon characters.
Yeah.
He was a character. You call him, hey, what's up, Doc? So that was fun. And he was quite a guy. So anyway, she introduced me. The lady a friend introduced me to her, and she introduced me to Jane. She said, hey, I've got this boring guy that you might be interested in. I was rather reticent, and I was almost 28 years old, not married, of course. But anyway, she introduced me to Jane, my only wife, and we got along pretty well. At first, I thought she was a little bit stuck up, and she thought I was awfully quiet and kind of not interesting. But anyway, as things evolved, we decided that neither one of us had been married. We didn't have any children. We both were pretty straight-laced. So everything clicked, and we've been married almost 52 years.
Congratulations.
But we have no children. That's the problem. We look at each other, so we have to look out for each other.
For sure. How did your military experience affect your life?
It made me pay attention to what I was doing. Because particularly aboard a ship, if something breaks, you got to keep an eye on things. There's nobody. Again, you look in the mirror. That's who's going to fix it. You can't call somebody if you're out in the ocean. So, a number of situations came up. It made me be more attentive to what my duties were, no matter what I was doing. And of course, instill discipline. And to be on time, we tease each other. In the Navy, if you're on time, you're late. We relieve the watch 15 minutes before time, which made sense. One thing that really bugged me as soon as I retired from the Navy, people would invite Jane and I over for dinner. I'll be here at 6. Okay. I ring the doorbell. Ding dong, 6 o'clock. Oh, you're early. Hey, you said 6. You want 6:10? I'll be here at 6:10. So that was a bit of a strain of adopting the civilian life where people are a little more relaxed, I would say.
So you were Master Chief, right?
Yeah, which is E9, same as a sergeant major in the Army or a chief master sergeant. It's as high as you can go in the enlisted grade.
So did that provide you with some leadership skills?
Absolutely. Yeah, in fact, one of which at Great Lakes, in the evening on duty, I would stand duty as a command duty officer, take place of the commanding officer in the place of operation of service school command. Okay. So overnight, it was my job to keep everything together. Such as inspecting the barracks and go through the meal line, make sure food is okay, that sort of thing. And we had women on base also. And to go on the women's base area, we men would announce ourselves, and we had an escort going through that area. So we make sure that the girls were all secure and so forth. But we had to do that. It was very interesting.
For sure. What things do you miss about the service?
Part of which is, I think, part of the responsibility of the job and the discipline. Meaning, you have an obligation in your particular what they call pay grade, what your responsibilities are, and just to make sure that everything is cohesive. And if you have a difficulty with someone, you deal with it at the level that you have instead of having them run out to somebody. But if necessary, we deal with discipline in our own way. We did things a bit differently years ago. Remember, I'm 78 now, so I was in 65 to 85. And the discipline then was a bit more, let's see, direct. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Because now some of this touchy-feely stuff and so forth, if I was on board ship, I'd have to be a little more restrictive than what we did years ago. We got the job done. Let's put it that way.
Is there anything that you were glad to have left
behind? Not really. Maybe just separation from my wife, but that was part of the job. You know, being overseas, because on a ship, we'd be gone for 7 or 8 months on overseas deployment. Well, and all my time was in the Pacific. So we're out chasing Ivan, the Russians, and so forth. Those guys are nuts. They were nuts then. I guess they still are. They're surface ships that cut across our bow and do some crazy things.
Oh my God.
I don't know what makes those guys think, but anyway.
What do you wish that civilians were more knowledgeable about military service?
Well, part of it goes back to when I was on recruiting duty. This was in 72 to 75. When they were doing away with the draft, and we had some civilians who would come in and kind of mock us for being in the service. I remember this during Vietnam time. And they were rather insulting and didn't respect the military. Not everybody, but a number of them did not. So that was kind of hard to take. And even now, we run into some people who think that we're just kind of sponges on society. Not true at all. Somebody has to defend this nation. Because if we didn't have an adequate defense, we'd have a real problem, because there's a lot of bad guys out there. And one thing that, just as an aside, really bothers me is the current immigrant thing where the border's wide open and have people coming in that we don't have a clue who they are. I don't know what they do with these people. What's your name? Jose Gomez. Okay. Your birth certificate? No. What's going on? I mean, they have absolutely nothing. How do you deal with someone like that? I have no idea. But that's one of my big issues.
Okay.
So,
what would you like people to know or remember about your story?
Oh, that any branch of service will instill discipline, great opportunity to get a great education. The Navy has a number of correspondence courses. I took some in first aid and a number of different first aid, or not first aid, a number of correspondence courses at no charge. Okay. And in Pearl Harbor, I was able to finish an associate degree through Mohegan Community College in Connecticut, but this was in Hawaii by extension. Took the college level exam, CLEP, or college level exam program, do those, get college credits that way. And married that with the SIU at Great Lakes, because they had two PhDs on campus at Great Lakes. So by enrolling with SIU, I was able to get a bachelor's degree before leaving the Navy, which got me a good civilian job. So the important thing is, if you go into the service, it's not that tough. Keep your nose clean, pay attention. There's always a squeaky wheel somewhere else. So let the leadership people deal with those folks. Do your job, and it's a great. I wanted to go into electronics because I'm a ham radio guy. My basement was full of computers and radios and so forth. I enjoy all that stuff, putting them all together, kits and so forth. But I hadn't qualified for the Navy nuclear power program, so they made us all machinist mates. So I was in engineering. Okay. So I did primarily with propulsion systems. But aboard ship, I got to know the ETs and radio men and so forth. A quick aside story is we were coming back from Pango Pango, back to Pearl. And one of the ships, I talked to the chief radioman. He spoke to the CEO, so I was able to put one of the 3 high-frequency shortwave radio transmitters on the amateur radio bands and make contacts from the Navy ship to Pearl. And the fellow in Honolulu I made contact with had what's called a phone patch. It's a transformer interface from the shortwave radio to the regular landline telephone line. And we put the word on the 1MC. The 1MC is a main call unit throughout the ship, letting any crew member who wanted to talk to his wife or girlfriend in Pearl could do so, line up out Radio Central. I'd give him about 3 or 4 minutes to make contact, and this fellow would make the phone calls. So we're south of the equator, out in the middle of the Pacific. And one fellow said, I have a girlfriend, a fiance in San Diego. This fellow broke in from Houston, Texas. He said, I can take that. So he took the call from us to Houston for landline to San Diego. Oh, so this fellow's talking to his girlfriend, his fiance in San Diego.
That was pretty awesome.
Once that was done, we were done with them. Then we put it just on the amateur radio band. And I asked the chief radioman for if he had a Morse code key. I was going to send Morse, because I know Morse code. He said, all right, he was embarrassed. He did not have his key. I said, oh, this is the time they did away with the requirement that radiomen know Morse code. So the chief and I are the only two who knew Morse code. So I'm copying Morse code with a stick or with a pencil. Radioman looking over my shoulder. And I'm the snipe. I'm the guy out of the bilges copying Morse code. And the radioman, okay, it was all Greek to them. But I mean, on the phone contact, I made contact with a fellow in the Soviet Union. That was the Soviet Union back then. Told him I was on a U.S. flagged vessel in Region 2, south of the equator. I didn't tell him we're on a U.S. Navy vessel to come to get you guys. But anyway, so that was quite an experience. So that was fun.
That's really nice. What message would you have for future generations?
If you're really undecided, this is directed towards younger folks, many of whom seem these days to somewhat lack direction. You got the broken homes, the single mom, all this stuff. But if you're a little unsure, consider the service, any branch of service. If you like engineering or electronics, Air Force or Navy, there's a lot of that. If you just want to be in the military or Army, anyone will serve you well. But that would be a great alternative to just kind of wandering the streets and ending up and getting into some job where there's really no future and you can't make advancement. But the nice thing about the service is the basics are taken care of. You got clothing allowance. Eat in the Navy, ate well, especially aboard submarines. Oh, good chow on there. And your reasonable basic care, medical is taken care of, which is good. Now, having retired from the Navy, I use Buckley Air Force Base for pharmacy uses. I have access to the commissary, the exchange, and all the recreation activities on the base. So I have a military retired ID card, so I can get on any military base anywhere in the world, really. So there's a lot to it.
Very nice.
And just a bit of a sacrifice, but the only, as I say, significant sacrifice regarding family. I was 28, as I say, when I married. Yeah. So I had all that sea time behind me. So Jane only had to tolerate one log in the cruise when I was overseas. Okay. And she was a registered nurse. So she worked everywhere I was. She worked as a nurse.
She just traveled along with it.
Yeah. So because she had got her license in California, she got reciprocity in Ohio, Illinois, Hawaii, so forth.
Very nice. Is there anything else that you would like to say in this interview?
Yeah. One tour I had, as I mentioned, 14 years of sea duty. A lot was on sea time. 3 years ashore on recruiting duty in Ohio. I briefly mentioned that. And 3 years on what they call the mobile training team. And I'll elaborate that and I'll explain. Mobile training team in Pearl Harbor was designed and it was modified to somewhat parallel what they call the Norse boards, the nuclear engineering qualifications for nuclear submarines. They're very stringent, very rigid, from commanding officer on down. They go through everything. We did the same thing on these general just engineering systems on board ships. And in Hawaii, we had 17 different ships that we would go aboard for about a week and go out for engineering training and prepare them for their operational propulsion plant exam, or OPI, we call it. How that worked, we go out for a week and we do engineering training. We would review all the records, training, engineering equipment, how everything is maintained and so forth, and do engineering drills, casualty control drills. You know, if you lose power, lose steam, lose electricity, what do you do? So we did that. We would divide the crew in how they do training and so forth. And once we did that, then the commanders and captains would fly from San Diego to Hawaii to actually do the inspection. And they would be on for about 4 or 5 days. We only had one ship that failed. Every other ship in 3 years, they all passed first time. But our chain of command was unique, because we had one electrician, he was a senior chief, master chief electrician, and 2 boiler machinery or boiler technicians, and 2 machinist mates, 2 of what I do. And then from there, we had a lieutenant commander who was in charge of our small group. Once a month, we went upstairs to Crew Dispatch, Commander Cruiser Destroyer Pacific, who was an admiral. That was our chain of command. Us, lieutenant commander, admiral.
Direct line.
Very limited, direct line. The steward recommended he'd pour the coffee, he'd leave, we'd tell the admiral what we found on the waterfront directly. No profanity, and strictly by the book. One ship was in such poor shape, commanding officer relieved the command, which is serious. So the word spread on the waterfront, we were a force to be reckoned with. Everything we did was by the book. That was really interesting. That was a very, very interesting tour of duty. Out of 17 different ships, you could find the crew made the ship. The ship is just a hunk of metal. But how you maintain it, how you discipline the crew, how you get the work done, that's what made it worthwhile. Very, very interesting. And that's how I got to fly to Pango, we flew to Narita, we were in Japan. And as an aside, how are we doing for time?
You're doing good.
As an aside, when we flew to Narita, Japan, we did training in Yokosuka, Japan. And short ways north of Tokyo is a place called Akihabara. It is an electronic paradise, particularly for ham radio guys, because Japan makes a lot of ham radio gear. And so I went along and I took some what I call QSL cards. A QSL card is a confirmation of a contact on amateur radio. It shows the date you made the contact, your call sign, the time, all that narrative is on what they call a QSL. There's cue cards. We use QTH is where you live and that sort of thing. I could bore you with ham radio stuff. Anyway, I took the QSL cards with me. It showed a submarine broaching service, Pearl Harbor, and so forth. So I'm going to these ham radio shops. Show my custodian, K86SC. Oh, they pulled the chair out. Here came the cigarettes. Here came the sake. Boy, they couldn't treat me well enough for all this. After 4 or 5 ham radio shops, no more sake. Anyway, that was really very, very interesting. And then I went down to the Ginza in Tokyo. And a lot of stores down there. Sony had a big store, a demonstration store. Almost everything they made was on the wall. Play with it, have a ball. If it breaks, we don't care, have fun. They had a 31 band shortwave receiver, not ham radio, it's a shortwave receiver. So I bought it home. It's a 31 band shortwave receiver, so that was kind of fun. Yeah, I had a ball. Yeah, that was great. So that's one of the advantages of the service. You can travel and see the world, really. Another thing down in Hong Kong, this was in 67, about 66, 67. And people were coming across the border from communist China, trying to get into Hong Kong. And they come over, and I'm walking around in Kowloon, in Hong Kong, that area. I've got about $300 or $400 US cash on me, which is enough to maintain the family for a couple of years over there. They're living virtually in shacks on the hillside. You can see them up there. And that's another thing that really bugs me, is particularly some of the younger people these days, they get upset. My battery died, my cell phone. Well, get a life, kid. Come on, I mean, this is ridiculous. I've seen people who are just barely scratching out a living on the earth, on this world. They don't. We live in such a luxurious lifestyle, no matter what, even if you're on welfare in this state, you live better than most of the world. So I pinch myself every day. I can't believe I live as well as I do. So I thoroughly appreciate this country and what it doesn't contribute. So if you can contribute to this country, do it. So that's my hard-nosed attitude about that.
Very good. Well, I appreciate you taking time for this interview, and I want to take the opportunity to thank you for your service.
Well, thank you.
And good luck to you for the rest of
my life.
Your life, yes.
Yeah, no, we're doing fine.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rosemarie.